Here's some examples. One of the big examples I thought was this situation many of you probably know about with Louie Giglio, Dan Cathy, CEO of Chick-fil-A, and Lecrae, the rapper, last year it was right after the Rayshard Brooks shooting in Atlanta, where he was, some of you remember, I think it was at a Wendy's, and he had failed the sobriety test. They were going to arrest him, and he grabbed one of the tasers from the police, tried to use it on the police officer. The police officer shot him, and he died. And this was like 2 days afterwards, something like that. And Louie Giglio has guests Dan Cathy and Lecrae come to his church, and they're going to have this night where they talk about racial justice, etc. And what happens is that Cathy and Giglio lament all this legalized oppression and racial discrimination and racial disparities. And they propose vague solutions, such as rebuilding the system, taking responsibility, fighting for African Americans, listening to black voices, never getting concrete, though. And their greatest demand was for white people to feel the pain of black people. That was the whole point, right? That's what makes you virtuous. Did you empathize? Do you feel the pain? Not did you go feed someone, not did you do something, but do you feel a certain way? If you feel a certain way, then that's what's needed. And Cathy declared, this is what he said, it has to hurt us, and there's got to be an emotional response. Giglio agreed, stating, we've got a ways to go to get to the point of empathy. Of course, all of this was sanctioned by Giglio's understanding of the gospel. Now, what was that? Louie Giglio, who's a pastor, spoken at the Passion Conference, as associations, I believe, with Desiring God, he said this, and this is June 14th, 2020. He said, in a way really reminiscent of liberation theology, that the gospel was a justice proposition at its core because it involved the murder of a man in broad daylight in the street, suffocating for the weight of our sin. The similarities between Jesus and figures like George Floyd were unmistakable. Pastor Giglio also believed the proper motivation for marching and protest was because the gospel proposition and the justice proposition were woven together from the beginning. The blessing of the cross meant that Christians needed to die to themselves and live for God when it came to racial injustice. This is liberation theology. I mean, if he didn't get it from liberation theologians, he got it from someone who got it from them, I would assume. And this sounds exactly like liberation theology. Different gospel, a gospel that is meant to promote some kind of a political throwing off the bonds of oppression in the here and now. And this was part of the gospel. He smuggles it into the gospel, which is really not good. That's actually false teaching. I'm willing to say that. It's at the very least being very unclear about the gospel, but I think you can see from the clarity of some of the statements, actually, it's not really that unclear. The gospel was a justice proposition at its core. No, it's not. It's a grace proposition. It's a mercy proposition. Justice is the thing that Jesus saved us from. And in broad daylight, on the street, suffering from the weight of our sin, that, comparing Jesus to George Floyd or to someone else like Rayshard Brooks, I mean, it should be offensive to Christians that Louie Giglio even went there, but he did.